It's been nearly a year since Senate Republicans heard this emotional testimony against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, but then decided to elevate him to the country's highest court anyway.
Brett's assault on me drastically altered my life. For a very long time, I was too afraid and ashamed to tell anyone these details.
When Christine Blasey Ford accused Kavanaugh of sexually assaulting her when they were both in high school, it was largely her word against his.
This confirmation process has become a national disgrace. My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations.
But Ford wasn't the only woman with accusations against the now Supreme Court Justice. Deborah Ramirez came forward to The New Yorker last fall with a graphic story about how she says during a drunken gathering at Yale, Kavanaugh exposed his penis and thrust it in her face, forcing her to touch it as she pushed him away. At the time, the FBI talked to Ramirez and reportedly found her, quote, credible, but then failed to interview more than 24 people she said could corroborate her story. But since then, 2 New York Times reporters have done the digging the feds would not. In a new essay, reporters Robin Pogrebin and Kate Kelly explain, quote, at least 7 people, including Ms. Ramirez's mother, heard about the Yale incident long before Mr. Kavanaugh was a federal judge. 2 of those people were classmates who learned of it just days after the party occurred, suggesting it was discussed among students at the time. They also talked to another former classmate of Kavanaugh's, Max Stier, who told Democratic Senator Chris Coons last year that he saw Kavanaugh assault another female student at a different drunken dorm party, though the woman in that case says she doesn't recall the incident. And when Coons alerted the FBI, they failed to follow up on that one either. The new revelations have a number of Democrats, including several candidates for president, invoking the I word. But is impeachment the right answer? Joining me, Nancy Gertner, a retired federal judge and senior lecturer at Harvard Law. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you. James Rappaport. Jim is former chair of the State Republican Committee and director at the New Bolson Fund. Jim, it's good to see you, too. Thanks so much for being here. What should happen now?
It should be an investigation.
By whom?
An investigation, one by the FBI. Because it's not just a question about whether he lied to the Senate. He was interviewed by the FBI. We all are. I wonder what he said to the FBI. And if he was asked, are the allegations against you by Deborah Ramirez true? And he said no. That would be lying to the FBI.
Well, I'm not 100% sure he was interviewed by the FBI.
Everyone, we
all nominees are.
All nominees.
Well, let me tell you what I am sure of. He was asked the question about this Ramirez situation by Republican Senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy. Here's the question, and here's the answer.
Are Ms. Ramirez's allegations about you true?
Those are not. None of the witnesses in the room support that. If that had happened, that would have been the talk of campus in our freshman dorm.
Actually, and the New York Times reporters say, well, in fact, it was the talk of the campus. What's your reaction? What should happen in light of these revelations?
I hope that the Democrats continue to move forward with this foolhardy vendetta.
Because the political impact?
First of all, all of those folks that the Times supposedly talked to had an opportunity to come forward last year. This was not news last year.
By the way, that is totally untrue. Ramirez has reported in the New York Times that she identified 25 people the FBI could talk to.
None of whom
they didn't talk to one single person.
And none of them came forward, though.
No, that's not true either. That's not true either. I mean, apparently they were all willing to come forward. She had the classic rape victim or assault victim corroboration. She had the people that she told that this had happened to immediately after, and that were members of her family. Yeah. And then there were also people outside that circle.
Let's get back to another thing. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that there at least is a question about whether or not he lied to the Senate. Does that, forget the politics, we'll get to the politics. Does that concern you? I assume it does, doesn't it?
I have to presume that he believed what he was saying at the time, and there are those on the left who are going to say that they wouldn't believe him if he said today was Monday.
But can we get back to the 25? Let's assume he just said to Senator Kennedy, no, none of that is true. If the Senate or the FBI had bothered to talk to some of those 25, they would have said it was true.
Well, but not only that, Jim, apparently,
it's also a function of when it came up,
his
too.
People and he
Who's his
were
people?
Brett Kavanaugh's people, in texts that are reported in this New York Times article, he was in touch with people before he testified. And
His people were.
His people. No, it says here, and also with Brett. She wrote that she'd been in contact with Brett's guy and also with Brett, who wanted her to go. This is two individuals, Carrie Burcham and Karen Yarosavage, were in touch with the nominee and his team to build a counter narrative before the New Yorker article came out and before the hearings.
Right. By the way, the reason that's doubly important is because at the hearing he was asked, I think by Senator Grassley, I'm not clear, when did you first hear about the Ramirez allegations? And he said, when I read them in the New Yorker, even though there are texts that suggest that allies of his had reached out to other people to counter Ramirez before. Can we talk about the politics, though? Why do you think, by the way, it appears that the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, who says we have our hands full with impeaching the president, even though I don't think Nancy Pelosi knows that right now, and that's going to take up, that was my quote, not his in the middle, and that's going to take our limited resources and time for a while. You believe there'd be huge blowback for the Democrats if they went after Kavanaugh?
There's already blowback for the Trump impeachment. There would be even more for this.
Do you not agree with that? I mean, a strong case can be made that there are 4 former Democratic senators who lost their seats in 2018. Nelson in Florida, McCaskill in Missouri, Donnelly in Indiana, and Heidekamp in North Dakota, I think, in great part because they voted against Brett Kavanaugh. Even if this should be investigated, even if they conclude that he perjured himself before the Senate, isn't the political cost here potentially huge proceeding with impeachment?
You know, one of the reasons why I was a judge and not a politician is because my answer to that is you got to call it bad when you see it. And it seems to me that, confirmation hearings of judges have already become a joke, right? Everybody knew after the Bork hearings that when you're asked your opinion about anything, you say, that could come up before me, I'm not going to say anything. But at least issues about background and integrity ought to be in play.
So does that mean that you think Nancy Pelosi's wrong on impeaching Trump, too, for the same rationale?
I agree. I also think, it'll be wonderful from my perspective. Yes, it would be wonderful from my perspective if the Democrats win in 2020. But I also think that what Trump is doing has to be labeled wrong. It has to be. It can't just be unpopular. It has to be labeled wrong.
And to label it wrong, if members of Congress believe he's committed an impeachable offense, they should impeach him.
I think that's right.
Do you not believe that as a matter of, forget politics for a second, but as a concerned American citizen who cares about the Constitution, if members of Congress believe, Republicans or Democrats, that the sitting President of the United States or a sitting justice on the Supreme Court has committed an impeachable act or impeachable acts, they should proceed regardless of politics, should they not?
Well, if you go back to what high crimes and misdemeanors are, I was not supportive of them going after Clinton. I thought he behaved atrociously. I thought his behavior was outrageous, and as somebody with 7 sisters and a wife and a daughter, and 2 granddaughters, his behavior was awful.
But he shouldn't be impeached because he didn't think it was a high crime or misdemeanor? Not because of the political. Obviously, you would love to see him in a hole. Can we get back to what you mentioned a minute ago? Here's Chief Justice Roberts on the politicization of the confirmation hearings, sort of what you were talking about in February of 2016. Chief Justice Roberts.
When you have a sharply political, divisive hearing process, it increases the danger that whoever comes out of it will be viewed in those terms. If the Democrats and Republicans have been fighting so fiercely about whether you're going to be confirmed, it's natural for some member of the public to think, well, you must be identified in a particular way as a result of that process. I think it's a very unfortunate perception that the public might get from the confirmation process.
What do we do about that? Well, I'm sorry, what do we do about this?
The irony is this. If you look at the fact that Democrats have been in absolute lockstep against Republican nominees since I was 30, so we're talking a long, long time. The Republicans, you look at Ginsburg, got 98 votes. And
Merrick Garland did so well, too. Remember how well he did?
By the way, that was completely, totally using power. And I had no problems with him doing that. And
Mitch McConnell said recently that if Donald Trump proposed somebody in his last year in his first term, very similar to what Obama did, he'd absolutely begin confirmation.
Right. Same parties.
As someone who was confirmed by the United States Senate,
right.
Assuming, my sense is you agree with Roberts, we only have a minute left, what do we do to depoliticize if that's a verb, the process?
Yeah, I'm not sure we can do it. It's also not the case that the Democrats have opposed every Republican nominee. When you look at the courts of appeals, there have been consensus candidates. You look at someone like Kennedy. Justice Kennedy was not opposed by the Democrats. It's just not.
That's
it's just
before
not the
I
case.
turned 30,
it's
by the
just,
way.
It happens to have been Bork. Justice Bork was the turning point because he was so far outside of the mainstream.
Frontline did a brilliant piece about how that caused McConnell
Absolutely.
to take but you don't have an answer to how to. There is no answer, is there? Really?
I don't know how to dial it back because to some degree it reflects the divisiveness of our politics. Maybe we should begin to think about judicial commissions, independent commissions, as other countries have. Maybe we have to think about a different process because as long as it's in the Congress, it will be politicized.
15 seconds. Is there a way to depoliticize this?
I don't think there is. It started actually with our dear Senator Kennedy borking Mr. Bork, and it has just gotten worse. And the reality is, and you have to acknowledge this, the Democrats are significantly worse and more egregious on this than the Republicans.
I don't acknowledge that remotely because the Democrats have proposed largely moderates, middle of the roaders. There's no question
By
about
your
it.
definition,
By
because you're
anybody.
a liberal.
Like
no,
Merrick
by
Garland
anybody.
was praised by Republicans
Yeah, Merrick
too.
Garland is a classic example.
We got to go. We'll continue at some point in the future.
Pleasure.
Jim Rappaport, thank you. Judge Gertner, appreciate your
Take
time.
care.